And for more on some of what was announced by the Minister of Basic Education earlier on, we on the line or via Skype to Noncedo Matubetube from Equal Education. A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for speaking to us. So one of the things that the Minister said at the onset was that they consulted very widely, and she also emphasized that she feels that there is no disagreement on some of the very salient issues of concerns, especially expressed by unions and parents alike. Do you agree that now that she's outlined some of these measures that you are on the same page?
I mean, the same page is a strong word, right? I think the initial issue that we found in the introduction of the minister's address is that she speaks about like the media and general public coming at them in a way that has them feeling like the Department of Basic Education doesn't have its head on straight in preparing interventions for the reopening of schools. And our contention has always been this idea of protecting the curriculum versus school community readiness is what we're mostly concerned. And so I wouldn't say we're on the same page, but rather we're in support of continuously thinking about, through consultation, school communities and teachers and parents around how children come back to school. So for instance, there is a conversation around staggering the reopening of schools for different grades. Some of the questions parents and teachers have asked and different members of the school community is when grade 7 and 12 learners come back first in June, for example, and therefore you stagger the grades in from those that are older. What is to happen to the younger children that will be left home? Because as the different levels of COVID sort of depreciate and we go from level 5 to level 4 and so on, and different sectors and parts of society or the economy open up, parents have to go back to work, right? So what's going to happen to children during that period? And there are also questions around the portfolio risk, the risk portfolios that are going to be sort of handed down and rolled out by the parental education department. Our critical question around this isn't about where this responsibility is going to lie, whether these things need to happen or not. Our concern is around support for Quintal 1 to 3 schools in particular, because you'll find that most of the interventions being put in place are fundamentally what is already existing in law. There's a norms and standards of school infrastructure that says all schools should have adequate and safe sanitation, which includes water security. And there's still a need for 3,500 tanks to be delivered to schools across the country. We're wondering if the government or the Department of Basic Education indeed has the capacity to roll out these plans in the month that's been designated. Another thing is around that there are 3,700 and above schools that have plain pitlet treatments. And we know that sanitation and toilets as a facility in particular are going to be important in ensuring that learners are able to go back to school in ways that are conducive, safe and adequate. We're worried if the department has been able to do this by law 2016, because that's the first deadline for the norms for infrastructure. Will they be able to do it in a period of 3 to 4 weeks? They've now also said, look, we've got a contract out. We're looking at PPEs for all learners, for all teachers, all people that are inside the school community between now and the 1st of June. We're concerned about that. So what we're actually looking for at this point is a detailed, comprehensive plan that says, look, when you say to us you've got procedures for the safeguards to contain COVID and you're putting these standard operating procedures, what falls under these operating procedures? How is the government going to be able to implement all of them? So, for instance, she speaks about scholar transport. She says, we'll make sure that scholar transport is running and it's safe and adequate for learners. But what essentially does that mean? A lot of people have said to us, and learners in particular, that are in the KZN area, for example, that the scholar transport facility is overcrowded. And now they've said, look, we'll put a regulation in place that says it should only have a 70% capacity. Is this possible? Yesterday's parliamentary meeting, the Deputy Minister of Education said, in the event that the transport pool will just get more buses, what do you mean?
Okay, let me ask you this question. She has said that there is an infection control program or package that is in place. Would you require more detail for you to feel satisfied that they are going to ensure that all children are safe, even though there is a checklist that they have to fulfill before schools reopen? And more importantly, I want to talk about this, some of the remedial measures. They have said that there is an emergency water supply program that should also go towards that infection control, but more importantly on the nutrition front as well. the department has said some of the foodstuffs that were meant for nutrition programs have been stolen through the vandalism. And I know you're very unhappy about what you say is lack of detail or at least initiative to ensure that these programs continue, even for children who are still at home.
So, I mean, these are the things that I'm referencing in particular. So the one is around information and education of communities and parents. I can't emphasize enough that the government can't stand in podiums on SABC 3 and roll off or rattle off safeguards at a very high end level, right? In order to educate and ensure that parents feel safe, that their kids will be okay inside school, you need to be able to comprehensively take us through what that list looks like. Everyone around knows what to expect and how to hold different entities accountable, whether it's the district, provinces, or the school through the senior management team. So we actually still feel like we don't have enough information of what a safeguard sort of policy or protocol for schools reopening at this moment looks like. The second is around sort of the checklist, right? And these are the things that I'm mentioning. So the minister said, for example, that there's a need to align departments for transport, water and sanitation, education, Department of Health. This is essentially what we've been saying to the government for the past 5-6 years. But in order to get anything right inside schools, you have to bring on board an interministerial department approach to things. And she rightfully said that they're having to plan and work back, because what should have happened is that when school closed on the 8th of March, from that date onward, the entire Department of Basic Education should have been thinking about how to best safeguard learners and children during the spread of COVID. But instead, they took off and only could be found online. And so they are grappling now with these deep questions, but also very pressed to open. And what we're saying, what parents are saying, what the general population is saying, that you aren't ready, and we aren't convinced that a month is enough time to put all of these things in place. So at this point, we have to place our hope in the NCC and hope that central command, together with cabinet, will do everything in its power to make sure that we tip all our eyes and cross our T's to ensure the safety of everyone in the community. The last thing that I just want to ask you is this idea on this issue of the feeding scheme. So now the government has said to us, so first of all, the money used for national school feeding scheme is ring-fenced, right? There's a conditional grant where this money only goes to feeding schools.
All right, Nonqeto, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much, though, for joining us. Nonqeto Matube from Equal Education, and I do apologize to the viewers for the poor quality of that connection. Let's continue with this conversation. We're joined now by Teachers Union NAPTOSA's Basil Manuel. Mr. Manuel, a very good evening to you. You were one of those teachers' unions that were consulted by the minister. You put out a statement about some of the non-negotiables that has been set out by the department, which you yourselves have concurred with. Having heard the outline, so to speak, as the minister has just given us, are you satisfied that you are meeting each other not only halfway, but you are in tandem with the objectives?
Satisfied means a lot, and being in tandem means even more. The answer is, look, we want to see the finer details. We've now got the broad outline. Some of the broad outline begins to address some of the issues we've had. But there are many unspoken things that are not in this broad outline that we would like to see. And we are concerned about delivery. So what we as a teacher union, as NAPTOSA, is going to do is we are going to use this period between now and the projected beginning date. Now, let me say projected because she hasn't spoken to the date of schools opening. It's only a projected date. Mm-hmm. And we're going to use that to monitor and to ensure that all our schools have what they should have. And this goes to the many, many things that we've declared as non-negotiables. I'm not going to go through that list now. But also to ensure that when our SMT members, that is the school management team members, on the date when they first return to accept these things, that there are measures put in place to protect them too. But of course, the minister did not talk to the non-teaching staff, etc. And these are the blank spots where we need to fill in, because we need to know when their return date is as well. And of course, what this has done, and let me say, we're cautiously optimistic. We're not fully optimistic. We're cautiously optimistic because it sketches a better we had before. But all of it is contingent on what is happening in health in the entire country. Because the minister does make one mistake where she says that the education sector is as a whole is not responsible for spreading the disease. And that is not true. Maybe children are less likely, but of course we have all our teacher members, all our non-teaching staff members, all our other education workers who are vulnerable. And then, of course, there's the big blanks. The big blanks is how are we getting all these extra classes to these remote areas? How are we getting these toilets there? How are we replacing the teachers? And for heaven's sake, let's not say what the DG said, that we're going to look at retired teachers when they themselves are probably have many comorbidities. So these are the things we have to look at.
Is that the proper risk assessment that you feel is lacking?
Absolutely. Absolutely, because we are going to now insist that we do a risk assessment of all our staff so that we know what we are talking about. To simply say we're going to look for X number of staff, how are you looking for them when you don't know what is there? And then, of course, the risk assessment is to see how many washing places do we have in a school? Can we get the water there? Things like that. Those are the risks, but it is the risks not to the plant, it's the risks to the actual people who are there. Then, of course, I need to make a statement. I'm not worried. NAPTOSA is not worried about catching up with the curriculum. The curriculum is something which we've designed. We are the makers of the curriculum. Yes, it is important, but it is not more important than the lives and safety of the children. And so we want to say that when we do, and she did qualify it, and I want to grant Minister Motshekga that she did say, if we complete 50%, we write on 50%. But I don't want us to foreground the curriculum every time an assessment. Lives matter, and the quality of what we're going to do when we go back matters. So the capacity of the department to deliver, that is going to be tested to the dizzy
So as
limit.
you say, you don't want to belabor the curriculum part of it, but you have said, you're also considering legal action should there be no indication of a proper risk assessment that is done. But you've also said that there needs to be a declaration by the minister that all schools are COVID-19 equipped in terms of the precautionary measures and safety equipment. Do you think that that is possible?
I believe that that is what is being demanded. That is what every parent wants. It is not what NAPTOSA wants. It is what every parent wants, and NAPTOSA supports that. We've got to have every province saying to us, yes, we are ready. Here is the ticking sheet. We've done this. That district has not done it, so that district we can't attend to. And remember, our issue about legal issues was around simply just asking teachers to go back without having attended to everything. Now we have more time. Now we can reassess and say, have we done what we are supposed to do? And it's not about the curriculum. It's about all the other things as well. And I don't want to pretend the curriculum is not important. Of course it is.
All right, thank you so much for speaking to us from NAPTOSA there, Basil Daniel. So let's continue with this conversation. We talked to education expert herself, a former MEC of Basic Education, Professor Mary Metcalf. She joins us via Skype. A very good evening to you, Professor Metcalf. It's good to talk to you. I want to start on that last point that NAPTOSA has made, that safety first and curriculum second, even though it's important, but they believe that that's where bulk of the focus ought to be. Would you agree with that sentiment?
Absolutely, it must be safety first, and curriculum and opportunities for learning follow. That's the clear message, and the public wants to be certain that it's safe. I also think that Minister in her presentation.
Okay, let's see if we can try and get Professor Mary Metcalf back. Unfortunately, it is a connection issue.